On February 25, 2026, Scott Kirby walked into the White House to talk about Dulles Airport. He left having proposed to the President of the United States the largest merger in American aviation history. American Airlines, the target of the proposal, was never warned. It found out from Reuters 2 months later. It sounds like the script of a corporate thriller, but this is a real operation, executed by the CEO of United Airlines against a rival he once ran and was fired from a decade earlier. And here is the paradox. Kirby planned this move for months. He waited for the right president, he chose the perfect moment, and in 72 hours he lost everything: the president, Congress, and the target, all while United's own fuel bill exploded by 100%. So where did this play really come from? And what does it reveal about the silent war between the two biggest CEOs in American aviation? Scott Kirby has run United Airlines since 2016. Under his command, the company became one of the three great air powers of the United States, with territorial dominance few rivals can match. At Dulles, near Washington, United controls 82% of the market. It is practically a monopoly inside the second most important airport in the political capital of the world. The combination Kirby imagined was even more ambitious. A merger between United and American would create the largest airline on the planet by revenue and by passenger volume. Together, the two would control roughly 40% of all domestic capacity in the United States, the equivalent of 4 out of every 10 seats sold in the largest air travel market in the world. But this is exactly where the paradox shows up. Kirby built an empire so big it became small. United is too dominant to grow organically, and too vulnerable to face alone the problem that was about to explode. Success became a trap, and the only exit he saw was swallowing the second largest rival in the country. Today, we are going to analyze how Scott Kirby tried to create the largest airline in the world and how he lost everything in 1 week. We're going to look at 3 things. First, the internal logic of the merger and the patriotic argument Kirby used. Second, the vulnerability the merger would never solve. The fuel that doubled in price because of a war 10,000 kilometers away. Third, the political bet that collapsed in 72 hours and what is left after the fall. What nobody put in the headlines is that Kirby's proposal had 3 distinct financial engines, and all of them were under pressure. The first engine is the aviation trade deficit argument. Kirby publicly justified the merger by saying that foreign carriers, many of them state-owned or subsidized, control 65% of long-haul seats flying into the United States. It was a protectionist thesis dressed up as a business plan. The math was simple. To compete with Emirates, Lufthansa, and China Southern, you would need an American carrier with unmatched global scale. The second engine is domestic economy of scale. The combined 40% of capacity does not just mean more passengers. It means pricing power over routes, overlapping hubs, elimination of redundancies, and the ability to spread fixed costs over a giant revenue base. In an industry where net margins rarely exceed 5%, picking up 2 or 3 percentage points through a merger is worth billions. The third engine is the most uncomfortable. Kirby cut United's 2026 earnings forecast from $12 to $14 per share down to $7 to $11 per share, a drop of nearly 40%. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, United paid $340 million more in fuel. Shares of the company have fallen more than 15% from the February peak. The merger, then, was not just offensive, it was defensive. It was the attempt to gain enough scale to absorb a cost shock that was destroying the balance sheet before the market understood the size of the damage. But there is a detail in Kirby's biography that makes the story even more uncomfortable. This would be the 3rd time he tried to reshape the aviation industry through a large-scale merger. Before United, Kirby was president of American Airlines after the merger with U.S. Airways, and he was fired. The executive who took his job was Robert Isom, today the CEO of American, the same man who received in April 2026 the merger proposal coming from the executive he replaced a decade earlier. The story did not start at the White House. It started in a corporate hallway more than 10 years ago with a firing. Kirby built United in exile, and in 2026, he came back knocking on the door of the man who took his old chair, proposing to absorb him. But this time, the stakes are higher. It is no longer an internal fight over a president's seat. It's a dispute over 40% of the American air market, over the architecture of the industry for the next 2 decades, and over who sets the rules when fuel doubles in price. Kirby's play was brilliant in conception and disastrous in execution. He waited months for the right political scenario. He identified Donald Trump as a president who loves big deals. He chose a meeting about Dulles, a legitimate technical topic, as cover to present the merger idea personally, with no middlemen, no leaks, no lawyers. The scale of the bet was colossal, a transaction that would involve hundreds of billions in combined market value, tens of thousands of overlapping employees, and a hub reorganization that would affect dozens of American cities. Kirby bet he could secure presidential approval before American even knew it was being courted. And here came the unusual innovation and the fatal mistake. Kirby tried to invert the natural order of a merger. Instead of negotiating with the target first and seeking regulatory approval after, he went straight to the top of government. The logic was that with Trump publicly in favor, American would have to give in. It was a political maneuver, not a corporate one. The vulnerability of the bet was exactly that. Without a willing partner, no merger happens, regardless of who sits in the White House. Kirby admitted publicly afterwards, without a willing partner, something this big simply cannot be done. He had built an entire strategy on top of an assumption he never tested directly, and when American responded, the response was ice cold. American stayed silent for nearly a week while its shares climbed on acquisition speculation. On Friday, after market close, the blow came. In a formal statement filed with the SEC, the company said it was not engaged in nor interested in any discussion of a merger with United, and it added that the combination would be negative for competition and for consumers. The next day, American shares fell more than 4%, but the real damage was done to Kirby. Trump declared publicly, "I don't like that they merge," and Senators Elizabeth Warren and Mike Lee from opposite parties sent a joint letter demanding answers by May 3rd. The asymmetry is brutal. Robert Isom did not need to negotiate, offer a counterproposal, or make a single move. He just had to say no and let Washington do the rest. American has a structural advantage that Kirby cannot buy: the right to simply refuse. Kirby went to the White House to build the largest empire in American aviation. He came back with a partner who said no, a president who said no, and the fuel bill that no merger can fix. Jet fuel jumped from $2.39 per gallon in February to a peak of $4.78 in April. To recover 100% of that increase, Kirby said ticket prices will need to rise between 15 and 20%. The merger is dead for now, but the war between two CEOs with a decade of personal history goes on, at the same airports, on the same routes, with the same expensive fuel. There is no plan B. The race is on. If you want to understand the real money that moves aviation, subscribe for more analysis. See you next time.